Fantasy and Some Flights, exploring the realms of beer, board games, books, and bourbon.
Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy and Some Flights podcast. I'm Nelson.
I'm Dalton.
And today we are talking about world building.
Building. We're going to build a world for you guys.
Yeah, exactly. it's like the start of a D&D campaign.
Episode 1.
Episode 1. Let's go. But before all that, we're going to, as always, talk about what we're drinking. But unlike always...
Yeah.
Dalton, you want to tell us what we're doing?
We're doing something a little bit different. So this is our 21st episode.
Yeah,
right?
we're legal.
Yeah,
we're legal.
Exactly. We're legal to drink now. Our podcast, we're allowed to drink. And so we've decided to switch a little bit. So what we're going to do now is, since I'm kind of the whiskey guy normally, I have brought a whiskey for Nelson to try, and Nelson brought a beer for me to try. So I'm going to talk Nelson through the whiskey that he's tasting, and he's going to talk me through the beer that I'm tasting.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too, because this helps. I like that we're starting this in like the fall and winter when like my kind of beers start coming out.
Yeah,
We've like gotten out of the IPA season really, and so you didn't bring me an IPA, which I appreciate.
I thought about it. I thought about it a lot.
Did you?
Yeah.
So do you want to do what you're tasting first?
Yeah, I'll do what I'm tasting first. What I do have to remember though is that it's not a beer, so I can't drink it at the pace that I normally drink during an episode.
Don't hurt yourself.
So I'm not blacked out by the icebreaker.
Right. So today you are drinking Minor Case Straight Rye Whiskey. So I started you off with a rye. I know you like rye, so I started you off with a rye. This one's sort of like a beginner rye. Like it's in the mash it's 51% rye, and then it has it's like 45% corn, and like the remainder's barley. So the corn, it will taste like almost like halfway between a rye and a bourbon.
Got it.
It's also this is from Limestone Branch Distillery, which is the same distillery that produces Yellowstone, which is like a really spicy one that I had a couple episodes ago.
That.
Yeah,
this is the 18 Chesapeake logo.
That's right. Yeah, it's the 18 Chesapeake. That's right. And then Minor Case is MC Beam. He's like a older member of the Beam family.
Okay.
So like that was I don't know why like who named their kid Minor. Middle name.
I just thought it meant like small case. Like.
Yeah, right. I did too. It sounds like small batch, right?
Yeah.
But no, he was known as MC. This one's sherry cask finished, and so in like the nose, it'll have kind of a soft. It doesn't have like a really aggressive nose. It has like some flowery like scents, but it's like very distinctly a rye. Like you'll get that. And then it has like a cherry and like so almost like a spice, almost like a oatmeal raisin type of like flavor, if that makes sense. Like it has like I don't know why raisin comes like forward, but like that's the thing that like it reminds me of. But again, it's like that. All that's kind of like under like the normal like rye pepper. Like you're gonna get that.
Yeah, I definitely get the rye. So
yeah,
like, it's definitely like that spice.
Yeah.
That I remember being in a rye.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is what I like, right? I like the spicy. You said the nose isn't that aggressive, but it smells more aggressive than I'm used to. So
that's fair. When I say that, it's because when I smelled it, it's like, okay, I'm not getting like a total like alcohol like flavor, like it's not like super aggressive in that way.
Yeah.
And then it's not like it just wasn't a whole lot of like, oh, like sometimes you smell it and it's like, oh, I can smell like caramel, or I can smell like fruits, or I can smell like something really like kind of presenting forward, and that one like not so much. The sherry will like really come through in like the aftertaste. So like unlike a lot of ryes, this one kind of like it has like its spice flavor, and then it kind of like cools down, and then it like settles out, and you get some of the like dried fruits and stuff that's like coming from the like dried cherry and that sort of thing that's coming from the sherry cask.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah, it definitely like I can feel the transition there. Like it cools down pretty quick.
Yeah.
So I'm doing the whole drink and blow out.
Right. So you don't hurt yourself.
I've been trained well. But yeah, no, so like I can get that. It does taste, rye-y. I don't know if that's the right word to say. Like it tastes like a rye.
It tastes like a rye, yeah.
But then on like the blowout, it definitely tastes different than like the Templeton that I tried.
For sure.
There's no spice on the blowout.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very technical of me, I think.
It is on the blowout. Yeah, I think it is. But I think like that's why this was probably a good like intro rye, is because it's going to taste like a rye, but it also has like some subtle complexities and stuff, and it's not like overly aggressive in any one area to where it's going to like hurt somebody who's never tried one before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like this. What's the price point on this guy?
This was like a $35 bottle, so pretty affordable.
Yeah, I've kind of realized that that's pretty much the price of anything that's not expensive.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of land there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it feels like that's kind of like just enough to where like you're probably spending just enough to get something of quality and not like overspending on like a fancy name or a big name brand or something.
I'm pretty sure if I had a 35 and a 70, I would not be able to tell the difference. But yeah, no, I definitely really like it.
Good.
Like, how do we do cheers? Like, since I don't actually own it, but I guess like I could go out and buy it, right?
Yeah, you could go out and buy it.
This I don't know if I'm ever gonna have a 4 cheers. I may.
Yeah.
But like I'm gonna keep this at a 3 cheers. Like I definitely like if I see it, I'm probably gonna buy it.
Yeah.
Just like out because it's not overly rye like the Templeton, which I do really like. I do really enjoy. I just bought another bottle today actually. But like I do. This would be a nice one to just have and to be able to pour when I don't want something that's gonna kick me in the face.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I think it's good for like an intro of like if somebody hasn't tried one before, like this is a little bit more approachable.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah.
One funny thing about this bottle, I've never had this happen before, but like I opened it and like I tried it so that like I could like talk to you about it, and then like I recorked it, and then like earlier this week I wanted to have some more of it, so like I uncorked it again, and like the lid of the cork like tore off, and like the cork was like left in the bottle. I've never had that happen before.
Get the wine opener.
That's exactly just what I had to do. Yeah, I got the wine bottle opener, like screwed it in, like popped it off, and then like luckily,
I love it.
Yeah, like luckily I keep a lot of corks of like old
nice,
bottles,
yeah.
so like I went in and pulled it out and was just like trying them until I found one that fit. I don't know. It's not the original
awesome.
cork on the bottle.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it.
I used a plastic one this time, not a cork one, so it didn't reach there.
That comes through. Like,
Okay,
I can
good.
taste that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd made sure you got a couple little cork pieces in
Yeah,
there.
it's the fiber. I need the fiber.
You
in
need
my
the
life.
fiber.
So let's talk about what you're drinking.
Yeah,
now.
tell me what I'm drinking.
So I went to the biggest liquor store I could find. It was
Wow, for me?
massive. Yeah, for you. It was a lot. Yeah, I mean it's like northern Indiana, which is kind of like or northern Indianapolis, which is like the more like affluence area.
Yeah, bougie.
Bougie.
Some
Yeah,
might
bougie.
say.
There you go. But so I went to a liquor store up there just to kind of look around because I was like, oh, maybe they're gonna have some weird stuff, and I found something weird that also looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And so I got you Southern Pecan by Lazy Mongolia, and so this, according to them, is the first beer ever brewed with pecans. So
Here we go.
it's a brown ale. So but it's actually I've never seen this before. I was like walking through and I like looked at it like on the shelf and I was like, yeah, that's probably gonna be it. But I'm gonna finish out the shelf.
Yeah,
I finished
yeah.
out. I was like, I came back. I was like, yeah. I mean, like that's kind of unique.
Yeah, for sure. Do you know? Is it like brewed like with or pecans, or is it brewed like from like that's like the
It's
only
brewed
thing?
with pecans.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Probably.
I don't know if pecans can ferment.
Okay, no, I mean like probably any sugar can if you try hard enough.
If you
But
try hard enough. Yeah, or that may be the reason for the 0.7% APV.
there we go.
No. Yeah, but it comes in at like a 4.39 APV, so
Okay.
it's pretty like low on the spectrum.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got a like a dark color to it.
Yeah.
So like the brown ale is
Right, it's
more
what you
brown.
expect. Yeah.
Go figure, right? But it's like an SRM of about 12. So it's a little bit darker than all of the IPAs that I've been drinking the last couple episodes.
Yeah. If somebody poured me a beer and it was this color and they said it was an IPA, I would think something was wrong.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I said 12. I meant 17. So yeah, 12 is what I'm normally going to because that's typically the IPA. But,
Right,
but
right.
I meant 17. So, but yeah, it's supposed like it has some malty and caramel flavors to it, which is kind of interesting, like nutty flavors. I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
I'm getting that.
Yeah,
for
you
sure.
are. So like, yeah, what are you thinking? What do you feel about it?
Yeah, because I wouldn't say like it's super. I wouldn't say it's like super malty. Like it's not like super sugary like a stout or something like that. But I actually I think I get a lot of the. We keep saying pecan. It's probably pecan, but like my grandma, like she lives in like southern Alabama and like she makes pecan pie.
Yes,
you know?
yes, it is pecan pie.
It's pecan pie. So this is a pecan beer, and it's like But anyway, I get like in the aftertaste, like like when you have like a pecan and you get like this sort of like bitter aftertaste from
Yeah.
like the skin of it,
It's like gritty almost.
yeah, like a grit. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that aftertaste is I think what I'm kind of like left with, and it's
Oh,
nice.
really?
It's not like a
Okay.
bitter, like unpleasant. Like it's a really. I can definitely like. I think I would have like if I had it and nobody had told me, I'd be like, what is that flavor?
yeah.
But then like knowing what it is, it's like, oh yeah, I can totally get that.
So I think the worst part about that aftertaste, for me at least, is the like texture of it. So if you're not getting
That's
that,
true, yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's probably pretty good.
Yeah, the texture is liquid. Normal beer.
Yeah,
It doesn't have a weird
it,
texture.
Like
at all.
washes all that like grittiness away. So it's
Exactly.
kind of nice.
Exactly. But so yeah, it's tasty. It's not like I said, it's not over. I think nutty is probably a good way to describe it because that makes your mind goes to like something that's not overly sweet. And I would say this is not overly sweet, but it's also like not bitter. And I think browns kind of land there, don't they? Like somewhere between the like bitter and
it's kind of the middle of the road
Right.
type. Just it's a beer.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
It's not going to be super malty. It's not going to be super hoppy.
right.
Almost kind of rhymed. It's kind of like the middle
This is
of the
the first
road.
episode
It's
of
pretty
Nelson's
smooth.
rap career.
Yes, let's go. Lay down the beat, Dalton. Let's go.
So yeah, I think for me, I would probably rank this one. I think this is right at 3 cheers. I think it earns that. I think if nothing else, it's worth the buying and trying.
Yeah,
right? Like
absolutely.
it's like, hey, this is according to them the only pecan beer in the world, so you might as well try it, right? But I don't know if I would I don't know yet if I would buy it again. And I think like brown ales are kind of like that though,
Yeah,
where
they're
it's like
mediocre.
Yeah, exactly. Like somebody pours it for you, and you're like, this is good. I enjoyed that. But like I don't know if I would like go out and seek it multiple times.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's probably not a lot of people out there that are like brown ales are my favorite.
Yeah.
Right? It's typically one side of the spectrum, but it's kind of like that middle ground where everyone can kind of be friendly. And
For sure.
Everyone
holds
likes a brown ale.
Yeah, it's the Switzerland of beer.
Yeah, it's the Switzerland of beer.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you for my Switzerland of beer. Yeah. I appreciate it. It's good.
Well, you have a couple more to get through this episode, so hurry up.
Get to work, kid.
Yeah, you're gonna go far. What? So let's hop over to what's on our mind. So what have you been reading, watching recently?
Yeah. So I've been. I have like actually a couple. I haven't done this really before on the podcast. I have a couple of complaints, and then I'm gonna wrap it up with a good thing.
Whoa.
You know what I mean? So I'm gonna talk.
Hot takes. I love it. I love it already.
Hot takes. So I've talked a lot about the Unwanted series. I've been working through that, and I am like now it's. I feel like I kept reading it because I was like far enough into it where it was like, okay, these are short. I can listen to them in the background. I have a lot going on. It's like I don't really want something I have to pay a bunch of attention to, so like I'll keep reading them. And like I'm just kind of getting tired of them. But like I'm in book 7 and of 7. And it's like I just want to finish it. Like I just want to know. But it just has like a lot of technical issues. Like it has issues with like forcing the plot, with like characters making like decisions. It's like there's not really an impetus for that.
I feel like they kind of like ran out of time, or
I think that the author had some really cool ideas for probably for world building. It's probably on topic for us. And they wanted to like force the characters to explore the world so that like they got to like show the world off to the reader.
That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to do. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But like basically it's a 7-island archipelago and there are 7 books and each book is an island kind of thing. And so
I like that idea.
Yeah, you like the idea, but then it's like they always go back to their home island. Because it's like not that far away, and so then the author has to like find a reason to like send them to the next island to explore. And it's like book 5, you're like, all right, come on, this is obviously like not what they would do.
Yeah. Okay. That's a little frustrating.
It is a little frustrating.
Are the islands like unique or cool?
They are.
Okay.
Like that's the reason for it is like they had all these ideas for what the islands could be, but like Pendragon had that same thing, but they accomplished it.
Yeah, because the Saint Dane is going to the next place, and so there's a reason to go.
Yeah, there's a reason to go, and there's in this book there's not so much. Like just like an example of that, I like the end of just like kind of like bad decisions for the sake of like storytelling. Like at the end of one of the books, a character like sets off to like do something. And it's like, wow, that like actually is kind of an interesting, like it's basically a cliffhanger, at the end of the book. It's like, that's kind of interesting. Like that might kind of go somewhere. Like let's see where that goes. And so like I started the next book and like literally like immediately, like first chapter, the character basically goes like, what am I doing? And turns around.
No!
You can't do that. It's like 2 paragraphs in and the character just turned around. Like you can't set up a cliffhanger and then not follow up on it.
We called that railroading in the D&D business.
I was so mad. I was like, oh, and then I kept reading the book.
Well, yeah, you're so far in at this point.
Exactly.
You have to finish it.
Exactly. But to its credit, like the book does really well of like setting up like some really big emotional moments. Like there are like some goosebump moments where like something really big happens. It's just the author isn't very good at like the connecting details, like getting the characters through the story.
Got it. Yeah.
There's good at like where the story's going to end up, if that makes sense, but not like the in between.
Yeah. It's a really good like overarching story.
Yes.
But like just making it work.
Has some technical issues. Yeah. I think the book overall is probably just younger than I am, and I think I didn't really realize that until later. Like I think it's probably targeting like young adult, or actually maybe even just like teen, like 13 to 15 kind of age range. And I was like reading it, and I was like, oh, maybe this is just younger than me. Maybe I'm just like reading in the wrong. It's just a different book than I kind of thought. So. It's enjoyable when it's not taken seriously, but like I'm so close to the end, I just kind of want it to be over, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Next book I started, and this is actually a book that I was really like highly anticipating. So I started Ancillary Justice, which is a sci-fi book. It's the first of a trilogy, and it's the first to win like what they call the sci-fi triple crown of all 3 of the Hugo, the Nebula, and the Arthur C. Clarke Award.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and it's written. I think it was published in like 2013 or something like that. So a relatively new book. Started out had like some really cool ideas, and I just like fell out of it. And I don't know, like I think it was maybe just that it's a very complex book. It had some very complicated names, like so it was just very difficult over an audiobook. And I think it requires more focus. Like I was trying to like listen to it like while working out. Like that's an area where I listen to audiobooks.
Yeah.
And it just like it wasn't working. You know,
it requires that full concentration.
Yeah, for sure. I think it just requires some like dedication.
I felt like that would be the case if I had never like watched Game of Thrones when I started reading through Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many like random names. There's so many people.
Yeah.
And like when I had watched it, I was able to like put that face to the name. But if I just like started with an audiobook, I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I don't remember any of these people. So I can see that complaint.
For sure. And it's like that where it's like I feel like I need to be taking notes right now, you know, in order to like listen to this book. And like I got about like 2 hours in. I can tell it's a very good book. Like I will definitely go back to it. It was just like one of my first experiences with that where I like started into a book and was like I can't read this right now, you know. And
it'll be a great second read.
Yeah, exactly. The first 2 hours of it, yeah, and then I'll like read the rest of it. I actually like I got it from the library and it like expired. So I
oh no!
So I had to go get it again. So anyway, those are like my two complaints. I've not had a ton of success in reading so far, but one thing I wanted to talk about in both of our last book episodes, or maybe it was even the one before that, we talked about Ursula K. Le Guin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about her because she was actually apparently, as I was like looking into ancillary justice, she was a big influence on it. So instead of having like something that's been on my mind that's been like good, you're getting like book facts with Dalton.
And so real quick, Ursula was the person who created the idea of the Ansible, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And we can't go too much into it for like spoiler reasons, but it shows up in Ender's Game, so we can't talk about like what it is, but it's a term that was coined by Ursula K. Le Guin. I kind of struggle to get through that name.
It's a tongue twister, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister. It's a term that was coined by her and then was like borrowed by Orson Scott Card for an element that he uses in Ender's Game.
Yeah.
So if you've read Ender's Game or if you've listened to our episode, you'll know what the Ansible is. But she's the one that came up with that. She's a writer. Her first award was in 1969, and that was for, I believe,
nice.
Wizards. I was about to say Pavlov. Here we come.
Sorry.
You waited. You tried.
Yeah, I was like, should I? Yeah, I'm going to do it.
So she won like 8 Hugo and 6 Nebula awards.
Good God.
She's a very awarded author.
Especially for someone like, I don't know.
Right. And I think that's partly just because she was a little bit before our time. Like her like famous books were coming out in like the late 60s and like 70s and into the 80s.
I got it. Yeah.
And I think she passed away in like 2018 or something like that.
Oh wow.
So like
recently.
relatively recently. Yeah. She is credited with a lot that I wanted to like. Actually, well, we'll talk about first. Her two first biggest books is Wizards of Earthsea, which I read, and I read that trilogy.
And that was a really good one, right?
Yes, it was really good, and it's kind of, that one is credited for coming up with the idea of a wizard's school. So she
really?
was,
okay.
that's like the first book where like a wizard school,
okay,
and so she
fun.
like laid the groundwork for Harry Potter with that book. Laid the groundwork for like Name of the Wind, some of those things, and was one of the first kind of, not the first, but was like early in the realm of fantasy to tell like fantasy in the way of like a coming of age type of story, like a character growing up over like a boy wizard kind of growing up over the course of the story.
That's really cool.
So she was really early on that. And then Left Hand of Darkness is her other really famous work. And I haven't read this one. I don't know much about it, except for that I know that it's a fictional planet where humans do not have a sex, like a gender. And so it's like androgyny or something like that. Meaning that they are sort of like asexual. It was written to address like feminist issues at the time. Like that's kind of why she chose to like frame the story up in that way. So it kind of put her on the map for that reason, because it was obviously like a really critical issue at the time.
Yeah.
So she's credited with that. She also is credited with the idea of like names exerting power. So if someone knows your like true name,
so like Aragon,
yeah, Name of the Wind a little bit.
Name of the Wind has it.
Spirited Away, if you've ever seen that, the Miyazaki film. Yeah, so she's credited with that idea. That also comes from Wizards of Earthsea.
I feel like she just like laid the groundwork for everything.
I know. That's why I was like, I started like looking into it. I was like, holy cow! Like, why don't I know more about this girl? Like, she a girl about this woman. Like, she's amazing. She did the Ansible, like we talked about, and then like as I was kind of just like reading through, and it was basically all these articles where people were like, yeah, she's like the best ever kind of articles. One of the best quotes I saw was that she was credited with elevating high fantasy to high literature, if that makes sense. So like, taking high fantasy and like addressing like social issues and addressing
very cool.
Yeah, like
very
that was
cool.
kind of like one of her. She's like I think the analysis was, it was comparing her to Tolkien because it was saying like Tolkien put high fantasy on the map. She elevated high fantasy to high literature.
Very
kind of
cool.
thing. I thought that was a really cool way to put it. So anyway, fun facts with Dalton. That's I didn't have a good book that I read this month, so I was like, or the last couple weeks, and so I was like, I'm gonna have a fact about Ursula K. Le Guin.
I like it.
So that's what I had. What's been on your mind?
So about a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I guess now. No, it's a week ago. The new book for the Stormlight Archives, Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so
yes, it did.
I being my very ambitious self, thought that I would, just kind of hop through and reread all the previous 3 books, which sums
like
to
one a week or something.
Yeah, which sums to about 150 hours an audiobook, which is insane.
Yeah.
So like I started that probably close. Actually, no, it was like right after our last book episode because I had just finished Aragon.
That's
like right then.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually started Mistborn. Because I was like, ooh, I want to read Mistborn again. And I got like halfway through Mistborn. I was like, wait, no, I can't be doing this. Wait, Rhythm of War is coming out. And so, like, the first book is about 40-something hours. I finished that, and I'm about a quarter of the way through the second book, which is Words of Radiance.
Okay.
So, Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer.
Yes.
And then the new one is Rhythm of War, which is kind of like, what is that? It's the same forwards and backwards.
Palindrome?
Palindrome, yeah. People think that the initials of all the books are a palindrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Words of Radiance and Rhythm of War are, segmented by Oathbringer, which is the O.
Yeah.
And then so Way of Kings, so it's going to be something K.
Which would be a very Sanderson thing.
Yeah, it would be. Like we were kind of talking about it a little bit before. We were kind of flipping through the book and you were saying like, I don't remember any of this. And that's exactly how I feel. There's so much content there that I feel like I'm rereading through it again.
Yeah.
But it kind of suffers from the thing that you were talking about, or the thing with Game of Thrones, is that there's a lot of names, and there's a certain like race of people that their names all sound the same. Like it's Dalinar, Adolin. I don't even remember all of them.
Yeah.
But like it just takes a while to like figure out who they are, where they are in the family
who's talking
tree.
right now. Yeah.
Who's talking? And so rereading through it again, like that's pretty much all I remember.
Okay.
Is like who is who.
Yeah.
And so it's really made for a interesting reread because I'm picking up details
of good.
Like why did Elokar do this?
Yeah.
And like when he did this versus Adolin doing that and yada yada yada.
I remember like missing like they would introduce a character in a scene. It's like I don't remember who that is.
Yeah.
In the first time through.
And Sanderson does do this thing which I think I will like after everything is done, but he does intermissions, so they're broken up into parts. Mm-hmm. And then the intermissions are basically like short stories from different characters that you never hear, or that you haven't heard from again. Mm-hmm. Or some of them you have, like Zeth, Sun, Villano, you've heard from again. But like it just kind of gives you, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it's a really effective way of showing the world.
Right.
So they all tie into his big Cosmere like thing, like everything is tying together. But if you have not read that book, you have to read that book. I mean, it's been one of those things where like every single second that I am listening to the Stormlight Archives. I can't get enough. It's just like,
and I love that when you get to that point with an audio. One of the fun things about an audiobook is we carry it around in our pockets, right? Yep. So it's like I'm driving for like 8 minutes and it's like worth it.
Yeah, totally. It's like 2.5 songs or So one of the other things that I really enjoy, which I felt like was the same with Pendragon towards the later half of the series, is that it is told from a third person limited perspective. So each different chapter is told from a different, or not necessarily chapter, but like there are different sections where you're hearing from different quote unquote main characters. And every single time that I switch away from a character, I'm like, no. But then I'm like, the next character comes in is Dalinar. I'm like, yes. Like so it's like this bittersweet, like, oh, I want to know more about what's just happened, but I also want to know more about this storyline. So he does a really good job of switching between those.
Yeah. It's like book 5 of Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah,
like
where all the
good characters
MVPs are
they're all in one book. Yeah, exactly. Like because it doesn't really have that problem, I don't think, where like there are characters in Song of Ice and Fire where it's like I really just don't want to listen to this chapter right now. Like I don't care about this character, you know. And I don't think that Stormlight Archives has. It also has fewer characters though. That it has like fewer perspectives. It's not switching through like 20.
It's like 3.
Yeah, normally
through
it's
the
like
first
3.
through the first book and a quarter at least.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think we started adding some more.
Yeah. I think a couple more get sprinkled in.
But quick synopsis. I did describe it a little bit in like episode 2 when I was talking. I think this was my second favorite book.
Yeah.
But quick synopsis. If for a reminder, just to promote it, because this is actually one that I think is so good that not a lot of people have read. I think it's just, it's such a high barrier to entry because they are long books.
Yeah, for sure.
But totally worth it. But basically it's a world inhabited by multiple different types of races, and also these like ethereal creatures called Spren, which either like take on the embodiment of a physical or an emotional attribute. And so like when someone's feeling pain, they're a pain Spren, and they all look the same. There's rot Spren. So like if like someone gets cut and it's starting to like flesh is rotting, like red like ethereal creatures are like crawling around them. Or like the emotion, like if you're feeling glory, like there's glory Spren, and stuff like that, or anger Spren. But then there are like these special Spren that start bonding with some of the main characters that give them special powers, and it's like this really cool, they're called like the Knights Radiant, is kind of like the path forward, and they're supposed to like take on the desolation and make sure that the world doesn't get destroyed, but they don't really know that. And I really like how just like the world is so unique. Like they have like, I'm going to save some of it for the world building, but like the world is really unique, and it just like, I'm so immersed in it. And I just really love that.
So I have a hard copy of The Way of Kings, the first one, right? And on the back it has a quote from Orson Scott Card.
Cool.
Right, author of Ender's Game, and where I don't know the quote exactly, but he basically says something along the lines of that Sanderson has like a really good grasp of both how leadership and how love works, and that's like what makes the book good. I thought that was like he said like that's really rare in fiction writers or something like that. And I thought that was a really, really good way to point out like that's why we love the book so much, because it tackles those two issues like really well.
Especially because like Orson Scott Card, I feel like nailed leadership.
For sure.
Right? So he knows what he's talking about. There's not too much love in it,
right?
But it's really cool to hear that from someone who like actually did a good job with it.
Yeah, for sure.
There's not romantic love.
Not romantic love.
Not
yeah,
romantic
there's the other
love.
types. Yeah. We've already done Ender's Game.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. The other thing that I've been kind of watching more so than reading is I'm watching through season 3 of Attack on Titan now. So I'm finally doing it. So Attack on Titan is a great show where basically it's another great world building episode, or like
example,
where the cities are, walled in, and like these giant titans that are anywhere from like, I don't know, 9 to 60 meters tall come and try and besiege the walls, and like Attack on Titan is like defending the walls basically.
Right.
Season 3 is really good. It completely changed course from season 1 and 2, I feel like. Yeah. And then also the animation style changed.
Yeah, it did a little bit.
I was just like, what is happening?
Yeah, it's very off a little bit.
But yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And if you're like gonna either if you're gonna rewatch it or if you're gonna like get into it for the first time, like now's a good time, because like the 4th and final season is coming out soon. I think I don't know. Last I had checked, it was like going to come out, I think, in December, but they typically like end up pushing that back. And I checked a long time ago, so I'm sure that it's not December anymore.
Yeah, it's like a Kickstarter. You'll get it in July, but they promised it for January.
Exactly. But it's highly anticipated. It's going to be a lot of people are really looking forward to it, so me included.
Yeah. So we're kind of hoping to time that correctly.
Yeah.
Then the last thing is a little plug. So Ready Player 2 is coming out. so Ready Player 1 is a book that we've been talking about, but Ready Player 2 is coming out 11/24, which I guess is like 2 days ago, as of the release of this episode.
Yeah.
But Ernest Cline wrote Ready Player 1, and it has like a lot of like the 80s like references and everything.
Yeah, like culture and
And basically, the main character is on the quest to discover the fortune that the guy who made this virtual reality thing has created. But the new one is basically the main character has found some like new crazy technology that I don't actually remember his name, but like the guy who created Oasis.
Yeah, Oasis is the name of the game,
the guy who created Oasis has created, and it's basically like, quote, it's going to change things forever.
Gotcha.
But there's going to be more riddles, quests, Easter eggs, and 80 references, and it should be pretty good. It's only about like 16 hours, so it's not like a huge commitment.
I feel like that's what about the first one was somewhere. It was in that realm.
Yeah, so which is about Lord of the Rings length. Like the first book out of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, not the whole thing.
So just throwing that out there, because Ready Player 1 was a really fun read, a terrible movie.
But it was really fun, and it was like, it'll be interesting to see if it makes a good second book. I don't think I ever expected a sequel out of it.
I never expected a expected. I will say that. Yeah. So
because it was such a cool like concept. I think that is like that carried it really well. So we'll see if the second book is as good, if it holds up.
Yeah. Yeah, so talking about like the sequels, I remember I was talking with one of our listeners, Nathan, and he was talking about our Lord of the Rings episode where we were commenting how the Lord of the Rings came out so quickly after everything. And what he said is that Tolkien actually had everything written and he wanted it to be one book, but the publisher was like, no, you need to break this up.
Oh, gotcha.
So
that makes a
so
lot
that's
more
why
sense.
they came out so quickly
That makes
after each
sense.
other.
That makes sense.
And that makes a lot more. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
You want to hop into icebreakers?
Let's do an icebreaker.
So last episode we had a awesome icebreaker with Charles.
yes.
So so we got to talk with him, and the icebreaker that you came up with was, what is your favorite game to play with 8 or more players?
Yeah, it was a cheap way for me to get recommendations for the upcoming holiday season. You know,
That's fair. That's fair. Hey, you're not supposed to be with 8 or more people.
That's,
No, it's 10 or more. It's 10 or more.
10 or more. 8, I'm okay. 8 or 9
You're
players.
okay, yeah. So we threw that out to the Instagram ethos, and we got actually a good amount of responses. So I'm going to highlight a couple of them that I think that are actually like games that we know of, because there's a couple on here that I just like don't know of.
Gotcha.
We have K Play Games said Deception like you did, but she also said Decrypto. Which, have you played Decrypto at all?
No, I've not. I know about it, but I haven't played it.
Yeah, so I think Decrypto is like a fun word game where it's kind of like you're trying to give clues to your teammates and the other team is trying to guess those clues.
Right.
And it has like weird polarization where like your team can see, or you can see the clues, but your other people can't.
Right.
It's got some gimmick.
Oh wait,
or
no, I
something.
take it back. I have played that game actually. I
Oh,
remember
no kidding.
Now that
Okay.
now that I remember, yeah, it's sort of like the polarization is it's like 3D glasses kind of thing where like you're looking at it. And it was a long time ago, but it was actually at a family Thanksgiving. Funny enough, so I think
Yeah.
it was maybe 2018 that I played it. But yeah, I remember enjoying it. It felt a lot like Codenames in that way.
Yeah, totally. So K Play Games and also Meeple Mike said Decrypto. So
Yeah.
that's been one of those that's like I've seen on Amazon every once in a while for like, it drops down to like $15. I'm like, should I? But I'm like,
Right.
Yeah.
But if you already have like Codenames and Wavelength, it's probably hard to find a spot for it.
right,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Especially now, like there's
Right.
2 of us.
Yeah.
Aram said Obscurio.
Yeah, that's like the other Mysterium, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which I didn't realize that went to 8.
I didn't either.
Because Mysterium maxes out at 7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And he also
I'm like
said,
looking at like the the DM board in my mind, like 1, 2, 3, yeah,
3, 4, 5, 6.
plus me.
Plus me. Yeah. He also said Smash Bros. Ultimate, which I think is fair.
That is fair.
We got Saber.A1380 said One Night Ultimate Werewolf.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of like the Mafia,
Right, it's
like
another
social deduction
yep.
thing.
Yep.
Which they do. If we ever get to go to Gen Con again, if we ever get to go to Gen Con again, what they'll do is they set up in like the hallways and they have like groups that play like One Night
that is
Ultimate
really
Werewolf
cool.
or something like that, and you just like sit down and you just play with strangers, and so it's like it's a really cool interaction. I've actually never played because I don't enjoy talking with people.
That you don't know. It's fine. No one else in that group does either. It's a bunch of board game nerds.
and that's what I had to like realize.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think that would be fun just for like the couple of people that would do it because it's like a thing you do at a con. The couple of people that would do it because like they actually like the game specifically, and then like a couple people taking it too seriously. Just like judging people around the circle. I think would be really fun.
Hold Fidatus, Ho Fi Das. Yeah, we're gonna go with that. Said Secret Hitler. So
Yeah, solid.
So Secret Hitler is good. Then we got a lot of code names, a lot of not Mysterium, but Wavelength, a lot of those types of answers as well. But like a lot of those party games. No one said Twilight Imperium like you did. So
Damn it. Come on, team.
Come
Let me
on.
down.
But
That's fine.
so let's hop into the icebreaker for this week.
Yeah.
So this week we have an icebreaker that was submitted by one of our listeners. His Instagram username is @boardgamejer. So Jeremy, and so he actually asked this, and then I asked him if I could use that as an icebreaker because I thought it was so good.
Cool.
And he asked if there was a book series that I would like to see turned into a board game, or a board game that we would like to see turned into a book series. And so I have answers for both of these because I had time to prepare.
Yeah, you had a little time to think about it.
So if you want, do you have both? Because if you don't, then I can answer first, and then you can answer one of them, and I can answer my other one. Or you can just go, and we can just sandwich it, or we can go both.
I'll pick one. So you pick one to answer, and then I'll supply an answer, and then you can finish it off.
Okay, sounds good. So the book that I chose was Mistborn, and I know that there is a board game for Mistborn. I just did not like it. So I wanted it to be done better. So Mistborn is like you consume metals and you're able to manipulate basically metal depending on
I think we've talked about
we've talked about it a
Maybe
little
once,
bit, but I think
maybe
that
twice.
it would be a really interesting, like, I know there's a role-playing game too, which I think would be a lot of fun to play through at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can choose if you're a misting, if you're a mistborn, if you're just a common person, and you get like special traits for that. But like from like a board game perspective, and I think it would have to be kind of like a setup as an Ameritrash type Eldritch horror.
Yeah.
Not necessarily an engine builder. I feel like that'd be kind of hard to pull off.
For sure.
But like if you could like walk me through the story of Mistborn, and like I'm interacting and like moving, my Mistborn character or Vin around the board, I think that would just be a lot of fun. I'd feel so immersed in that game.
Yeah.
And it would like be one of those Ameritrash games that I think I would really enjoy.
I think like we see more. It's sort of like book to movie adaptations, right? Where like we see more book to board game adaptations that are bad than we see like book to board game adaptations that are good. Like most of the time it feels like they threw the book on it as like a skin to some like mediocre mechanics because they knew it would sell well,
right.
They got the license for it or whatever. There are like exceptions to that, obviously. Like Game of Thrones is like a really good exception to that. We've talked about that one a lot.
Yep.
So I think like
War of the Ring.
Yeah, War of the Ring is a really good one, but
We
there's
need to
also
play
a
that
lot
again.
of Lord of the Rings games that are bad.
Yeah, we need to play War of the Ring though.
Yeah, I
Again.
do. I love that game. So I think like because of that, like my mind goes to like wanting to go the other way, like make a movie that is, or sorry, make a book out of a board game, because like there's not I don't know if there's really much, if at all, precedent for that.
Right.
Like books that are out there that were like inspired or started by a board game.
I can't think of a single one.
Yeah, I can't. Off the top of my head, anyway, I can't think of one.
So if you got to write it, or if you got to
If I got to license
contract Sanderson to write it,
which board game would I want him to draw from? I think, and I feel like I just talked about this game because I talked about it in like the last episode. I know, right? I'm disappointing, guys. I think my mind would go to Imperial. I think that would make a really good book.
Oh, that would be an interesting book,
Right? And so it's about like, if you didn't listen to the last episode, it's about like basically you play the role of a financial institution, you bankroll World War I. And so I think it would just be like really interesting to hear, like, I don't want like a historically accurate one. Like I want like a historical fiction version of it, of like showing like just these like really messed up characters like making these like sideways deals. And it sort of like, you'd have to do it like a political sort of book, right? Where there wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be a war book. It would be like a politics book. People stabbing each other in the back. Or
that'd be really cool.
Like I think that could make a good setting at least.
That'd be awesome. That'd
focusing
be really
on world war, but like not on the war part, on like the backstage part. I think that'd be kind of cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I did have an answer for my adaptation as well, and that'd be Scythe.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Because Scythe also has like already a pretty rich backstory, and like I think
there's like lore in Scythe.
Yeah. But basically, like Mechatol Rex has fallen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the factory has fallen. So Mechatol Rex is
right. Rome has fallen. Yeah.
Rome has fallen, and then all of these warring factions are trying to gain influence and catapult themselves to the next leader of Europa, or I think it's Europa.
I think
and so I just think it would be really cool. There's a lot of like, and they're all kind of loosely based off of Rushvet is Russia, right? So they're all like loosely based off of current country.
And,
yeah. Where I just think that would be a really interesting book, because it's like this steampunk-esque type era where it's like, you're still farming, but you have these like crazy mechs. But, there's, and it's just like, I think that would be a really cool way to like dive in and like see, maybe like do a 7-book series or something like that, and like each book is the same timeline but from the different factions or something like that. I think that'd be really
see that
cool.
working out really well.
Yeah, just
I haven't read like a lot of steampunk either.
I haven't either.
I know that it's out there. I just like it would be a fun like genre to kind of like play into. You get to play around with technology like a little bit. You can't be like too crazy, but you can like do some things that are kind of funky.
Yeah, I guess the closest I've gotten is like the second era of Mistborn.
Yeah, that one definitely fits in.
Bit.
There's like the third book of Pendragon is like takes place like
they got a little bit of that, and then like Korra.
Oh yeah, Korra definitely.
Avatar.
Right, the Legend of Korra,
has got some steampunky
for sure
stuff to it. But yeah, no, I thought that was a really interesting question. It kind of bridged two of our pillars.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Yeah,
board games versus beer. No, board games versus books.
if you could have a board game that would be a beer.
Yeah. Ooh. No, that's one you have to think about.
That's one you have to think about. But yeah, thank you, Jeremy, Board Game Jer. That was a fun question.
It was awesome. So let's hop into world building.
Let's
so
do it, man.
the topic of the day.
The topic of the day.
So Dalton, you want to give us a brief synopsis of what world building is?
Yeah, sure. So topic we're talking about, it's pretty self-explanatory just in the name, right? But is fairly nuanced once you start getting into what makes for good and bad world building, right? So
I agree. Yeah.
So we're talking about anything. We're talking about basically the setting is another way to think of it.
Yep.
And so if you're take Friends as a show, right? Yes, it's set in New York City, like the show Friends.
I wouldn't know, so.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, well, I'm explaining it to you. It's set in New York City.
Yeah.
But world building takes place in the specific apartments that they live in, right? It's taking place in the coffee shop that they always go to, right? There's characters that recur there, and there's a specific couch, right? And it's iconic on the show and stuff like that. So those details get brought in to make this story happen in this very specific place that the readers and the viewers or whoever can also connect with. So it's more than just strictly the setting. It's everything that's going on where the story is taking place.
And I think a lot of good writers would have all of this kind of fleshed out before they start writing the book necessarily. So
for sure,
they kind of understand what the world is. They know what's going on. And I know Sanderson does this a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Where he knows what's going on the other side of the continent, but he doesn't tell us. We don't know. Right. But he's able to do that in a sense that he just has this fleshed out world, which allows him to bring in elements from different parts of the society to fill in story or to add in additional stories. I also think of this as if you're good at world building, this would be a phenomenal tool to have as a game master for a D&D or a Pathfinder session. Just because we've dallied with this trying to build our own world, and it's not easy.
No, it's so hard.
It's really hard. It's really hard to have unique ideas, and I think a lot of the ideas, and it's the details in the world that really bring it to life.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think world building is one of those things where you can read a book that has poor world building, and it will feel like something is wrong, and it'll be kind of hard to put your finger on.
Right.
But it'll just feel off a little bit. And then ones that are really good at it, they can't carry the story by themselves. A good world doesn't make the story, but if it is a good story and it's told also alongside really good world building, then it becomes extremely memorable, right? It locks you in.
Absolutely. And I think the MVP of this is Brandon Sanderson. I think he's probably my favorite in that sense, where he brings in a lot of elements. All of his elements are unique. And whenever I'm reading a Sanderson novel, I think because his world is so unique, I just feel, I said it earlier, I feel so immersed in the world. I feel I kind of understand the religions. I understand what's going on. I understand the politics of stuff. Whereas there are some other novels which I really enjoy the story, but I'm not necessarily immersed in the world. It's they're telling me the story. I'm not getting immersed into the story, if that makes any sense at all.
No, for sure. I think when we did our magic systems episode, episode 4, we talked a lot about Sanderson because magic systems are where he really shines. And I think this is, or one of the areas where he really shines. I think world building is the other one. I think this is his two main strong suits as an author. Were there other just as you were I don't know, thinking about this topic or preparing for this episode, were there other I guess big iconic names that came to mind for you when you think about really good world building?
So I think Rowling does a good job. J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. It's gotten so iconic there are theme parks after it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
The story is really good, but also just the world where you get immersed into Hogwarts. You get and it's kind of interesting because it's
people
the
take
world
tests to know what house they're in. You succeeded in world
Yes,
building.
you really did. And it's really interesting because it's the world that we know. It's London, it's England, right?
Right.
But it's the behind the scenes world that you know. I have a couple more. What do you got?
I think that one's obvious. Sorry. I say
damn. Okay,
fine.
fine.
It's obvious. Yeah, fucking easy. Yeah, okay.
Cop out. Cool.
No, didn't mean that. Mean it that way. I think that one's natural. I think it's definitely on my list as well. Other big names Star Wars is right up there at the top, right? I think Star Wars has a really interesting good and bad, which I want to get into, but not right now.
Yeah, okay. I like it.
I also had Jurassic Park on there.
Oh,
I know that's
that's
not
an
obvious one, but I just it's one where it's that's such a cool idea, and it's it's a good world building exercise of if this was true, what would happen, Yeah. And then all of the decisions that fall out of that feel very natural, and the world building just really supports the story. It fits in this really satisfying piece of a puzzle.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction that we have to make is that I think of world building into two kind of camps.
Mm-hmm.
The first being a completely new world. It's Middle Earth. It is Lord of the Rings. It's the Shattered Plains in Stormlight Archives.
Yeah, it's a planet Dune.
And then the other camp is modifying a current world, so like Friends, right? Or Jurassic Park. Like that happens on Earth in like a normal setting. It's just on a remote island.
Right.
And typically the world building that is, the Earth world is a little bit different. The mesh that I have here, which I thought was another good example, is Pendragon. He created 10 worlds.
Right.
Where 10 different territories that the main character Bobby Pendragon will go to, and he gets to run through this world building episode every single time, and each one of them is pretty unique. It's kind of fun, it's kind of interesting, and like that's one of the things that I really enjoyed, listening or reading through Pendragon series the first time. Is like, oh cool, they're going to Ibarra. What is Ibarra? Like, I just want to know what that is.
Explore that. Yeah.
So I think of world building as one of the topics that I really enjoy in a book. Like there is an overload of world building. Like you don't want to like throw so many facts at somebody that it's like, oh, the sun rises at 43 degrees, and it's like, okay, I don't care about that. But the more detail that you give me, I think I'm probably more okay than a lot of people, because I just love that. Like I really enjoy world building. I love it. So
for sure. Another one that like appeared on that it was on my list that I remembered when you were talking about that sort of like Earth mesh. How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
It's like a random, I don't know, it's not like iconic or something. It's like one of the smaller ones, but that had such a cool world. It was like such a cool, like, okay, it's going to be like Nordic peoples like meet dragons, but like they're not gonna be like normal dragons. They're gonna be like quirky and like different types, and they're gonna be like fun and animated. That was a book first, right? I've never read it, but
I did not know that.
Yeah. And I don't know, that one's always like I that's another one where it just you use the in our last board game episode you used the term ice skating, where it just like it felt like it just fit and was right,
it worked.
From a world building aspect, I think that one knocked it out of the park.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of, like, world building is such a broad topic, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So I have a couple of things written down that I just like was brainstorming things that I consider part of world building.
Okay. Yeah.
I have like magic, which we talked about, but like I think magic is definitely a part of world building. So like, how does magic shape the world? There's this weird cavern that nobody knows why it's there. It was definitely created magically because the walls are super smooth or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it hard versus soft? Is it banned? Are you going to get killed if you use magic? That's a huge thing about the world. Right. And I've kind of expanded, I don't know if you did, but I kind of expanded world building to not necessarily natural features, but also kind of like the politics and the religion.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Everything that kind of goes into, can you, sim drop yourself into the world and understand how to interact?
Yeah, for sure. Like alongside magic, like what technology is available, that is both in a like sci-fi sense, like sometimes like we've talked about it in like a sci-fi sense, like technology is the quote like magic system. It's just like a different way to explain it, but it's accomplishing the same thing. So it can mean that, but it can also mean the setting of Harry Potter is again very different from the setting of like Name of the Wind, right? Like they're sort of like feudal age like technology versus like modern day technology. Even though technology isn't the quote magic system, it's still like an important part of the setting. I think you're absolutely right that like nations, geographies, governments, economies can play a really big part of world building.
Absolutely.
And they things like that. The reason that it's not, again, you don't want to like sit down chapter 1 and like read through like encyclopedia of like how this world's economies work, right? But you can notice like, okay, does it explain or supplement the story, right? As an example, like Red Rising, which is like, it's a book we love, we talk about a lot. Like it gets to the level of like who takes away the waste, like who does the farming and stuff like that. Like that's an important, it supports levels of like oppression, right? And levels of like a hierarchy.
Yeah.
To help tell the story, but it's like it's done in a way where it's like, okay, there is a hierarchy, but there's like a reason for it and it's believable.
Yeah, and you can sit there and when Pierce Brown writes a sentence saying, like a red walked by, what their story is. Almost like you don't know their specifics, but you kind of know the general idea of where they've been and what they do for, how to feed their family and everything like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think another one is like religion. So like you can have anything from like Ender's Game, where the main religions are like Muslim and Catholic. Right. To made up religion. So like in Mistborn, they worship Mistborn, or they worship the Lord Ruler. He is God.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
how does that play? Like, because if you're looking to, this is pretty early in Mistborn, so it's not like a spoiler or anything.
Right.
But if you're looking to overthrow the Lord Ruler or like a king, that's one thing. But if you're looking to overthrow God, that's another like whole thing.
It's a very different thing.
Then I think one of the most interesting parts of world building that I like took a lot of notes on that I really wanted to dive into is weather.
Weather.
Yeah. So I think weather does such a good job because we can relate to weather, right? Like we understand, especially living in the Midwest, right? Like, we know and love weather.
Yeah.
But like we know what snow is, we know what storms are, we know what that is. And there are stories where like I don't think Aragon ever really mentions, or the inheritance cycle ever really mentions the weather at all.
Yeah, like maybe it's raining in a battle scene every once in a while or something. Maybe.
And so it doesn't really play the factor, which like Aragon is a pretty lighthearted fantasy novel, and Paolini was 16 when he wrote it, which is phenomenal. It's a great book. It's a great story.
Right.
But like I don't feel like I'm as immersed into Aragon as I am in like to Dune, where like Dune goes into detail about the storms, about the sandstorms, about kind of what's going on, and I can like get into that and understand.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially since like weather is kind of universally, I guess, relatable. Like, you know, and I think it's definitely part, but like every once in a while, like an author will come up with like a weird weather scenario, you know, but like it's being pieced together generally with like characteristics I understand. And so I think you're right. It helps like the reader kind of become a part of the story and like, oh, I could see myself standing in a sandstorm. Like I can envision what that would look like.
It really helps you immerse. So like
for sure.
In Mistborn, there's a lot of mist around.
Yeah.
And I've been in fog, I've been in mist, and I can picture that a little bit easier, and it just helps me bring myself into that world.
Yeah.
Or like in Game of Thrones, it's super cold.
Yeah.
Above the wall, right? Like
right.
And I can understand that when, you know, Jon Snow is just voyaging out into the north, into the uncharted lands of the north, and he talks about how cold he is. Like I can feel that in my bones.
For sure.
So I think weather is one of those that kind of separates the good from great world builders.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be an integral part of the story, but as long as it's described. And so I keep thinking about this, and I keep thinking of how this would make like a really good like crossover, like how to like world build for DM / how to like, but like, and I try and do that when I'm DMing is like describe the weather. So like players are more immersed. And,
yeah,
like,
that makes sense.
So like I keep going back to that, but I think it's really interesting when authors describe the weather, and then when authors put in situations where characters in their story need to interact with weather. So like, and here we go, going back to the Stormlight Archives. Like
it's a natural transition here.
Storm is in the name.
It's in the name.
So they have
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, they have these things called high storms, where the high storms are these crazy powerful thunderstorms that come through every once in a while and just like destroy everything. And like these things are so powerful that there's like the grass in the land has like evolved so that when the high storm is coming, the grass like retracts into the like soil.
Yeah.
Right. So
it goes, nope, I'm out.
Yeah, it goes, nope, I'm out. And it's just like every single character in the book has to build their life around when the high storm is coming.
Right.
And they have to, you know, shelter up. And this happens every couple of weeks. And it's just like, oh, and how he like weaves that into, okay, the high storm is coming. How does that play into religion? How does that play into justice? How does that play into, because they'll do the thing where they don't have to kill someone. They think the god is providing the high storm. So they will string someone up by their feet in the high storm and let God decide if they live. Right. And so it's just like, I love weather and how it like can interact with world building and how great authors can like mesh it into their story.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that a lot. And I love like when you're talking about there, one of the signs of really solid world building is when something like weather, like you said, starts to get outside of influencing just weather, and you start as an author, they start showing you like here's how it can influence things out kind of outside of its normal. Because otherwise, like if I'm reading a book and everyone's acting the way that I think they're going to act, it's sort of like normalized to like my experiences and stuff. But you're totally right. If everyone grew up in a world where like everyone could turn invisible, you know, on a whim, then like they would have a completely different set of justice of like laws. They would have a completely different sense of morality maybe and religions, and everything would be totally different. And the author needs to kind of like play that out. And so a simple change like, hey, there's a hurricane level storm that occurs every 2 or 3 weeks that needs to play out through the society.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool point. Like, yeah, no, I'm just thinking about that. How if you change one little thing, what is the ripple? What's the butterfly effect?
Right, exactly.
So like
and it needs to play out, or else it just seems like cheap.
Yeah,
know?
it just seems like, hey, you drop that in there. It's like, oh, hey, like, yeah, everyone can go invisible. It's like, okay, cool. But like, there's got to be a religion around that. There's got to be, laws around that. And just like, how do you as an author, or how do you as a reader want to see that evolve?
Yeah.
That's a really cool point.
Yeah, it definitely ups the immersion.
Yeah, definitely makes me want to think about, world building like a D&D setting. It's like, okay, this is a cool idea. I'll just drop it in. Players will think it's cool.
Right.
But then it's like, okay, no, it actually has to have an effect.
It has to have an effect. Yeah, everything has to be different. I love that you chose like one sort of element to like deep dive into, because I also chose an element to kind of
awesome.
deep dive into.
What is it?
So big part of world building, language, right? Spoken.
Okay.
What is spoken makes a really big deal, and what is also specifically not said is also a really big deal.
Yeah.
Right. He who shall not be named was a really big deal.
It really. Oh yeah, no,
Potter,
I didn't even think about that.
So
but
like,
yeah, that is completely world building right there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely an element of world building. It could, and one reason it can be stripped from the story. It doesn't matter, right? It can be taken out, and the story still like functions completely fine. But the fact that it's there makes it a better story. So like, is everyone speaking like a common language? Are they speaking like broken languages? Is anyone able to communicate with anybody, or like, are they going to run into situations where they're not going to be able to communicate with someone?
No, yeah. And my initial thought was going to Ender's Game, where everyone kind of speaks English at Battle School, or the common language, but then there's like Bonzo or Bozo Madrid, who like will speak Spanish, and there is Spanish spoken, and I feel like Spanish is spoken when it's a very intimate moment in Ender's Game, and it kind of feels like it's one of those where it's not a new world, it's the existing world that is, and if you know and understand Spanish, you can understand what they're actually saying. They usually translate it for you. I think Orson Scott Card does a good job of utilizing language to convey emotion in that sense, where everything is done in English, but if something is spoken in Spanish, it's passion. Like he Bonzo, and there's a couple other characters that speak Spanish, where they implement, and when they're caught up in the moment, they speak Spanish, and you can kind of feel, even if you don't understand what they're saying, you can kind of feel the emotion coming through from them speaking a different language.
For sure. And even like authors that will make up languages for like, and maybe they're like writing it specifically, or maybe they're just saying they're like speaking in like blank language, but oftentimes they have like a connotation. They it's either like a subdued and like rigid language, or it's a very fast and emotional language like Spanish is, or something like that, and that can add like a lot of depth and a lot of like connection to like kind of the cultures, right? Language is often very like strongly linked to a culture of a society.
Yeah, bringing back to Stormlight, because that's what I want to do with a podcast about. The Parshindi, which are like, they're like slaves, but they're also kind of what the high races are fighting against. They have a language where emotion is conveyed through cadence and song, which I think is just a really interesting mechanism. So like all their words are the same, but depending on if they're entertained, they say it in a different like rhythm. Right. And so like utilizing even rhythm, which I just like, and again, I think I said it, I was like, I don't remember much about this story, so I'm really hoping that they go into more. And I think what we're going to see is a lot of, in Rhythm of War, is a lot of more about Parshindi. Yeah. Because it's, when they're fighting, they're singing a tune in cadence, and they're they're singing the war song, or if they say it to amusement, like, and that's actually how it's described in the book, is like she said to amusement, or in the amusement tone, or something like that. Yeah. So you can convey emotion through like that. I just thought that was a really interesting like utilization of language, like, that I never thought of before. Yeah,
for sure. In a similar vein, Name of the Wind has a culture where they speak a normal language that everyone can understand, but they convey emotion through like a sign language. Right? Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and so like sort of just I think it's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it might actually be in like the next book, right? It's not Name. What's the book after Name of the Wind? Words of Radiance. Words of Radiance. Wise Man's Fear.
Yeah, that
Wise Man's Fear. Yeah, there we go. We're good. Wise Man's Fear, like, and so like the way that they interact, like they come across as like stoic and reserved and like better than thou to like everybody else, but it's actually just that they aren't people aren't picking up on their emotions, right? They speak in like a monotone and they show emotions like with their hands. They're also able to like communicate with their like sign language and like show their emotions to people without talking, right? Whereas like sometimes like you and I in conversation, like we have to read that off of like facial expression. They have like a very explicit like, here is what I am feeling, and they can like sign it to each other, kind of thing. And so like just the way that plays out in their culture, and then also in the way that like their culture interacts with other people, like makes for a really great world, you know?
So that reminds me of like Aragon. Or the inheritance cycle, right? Where like they all have a common language that they're speaking, but then they also have this ancient language that controls the magic in the system, but you cannot lie in the ancient language.
Oh yeah.
If you say something, and Brahm, like Aragon's teacher, kind of demonstrates this when he tells a bird, and everyone can understand or every like non-cognizant creature can understand the ancient language. He tells the bird, "I'm not going to harm you," and the bird flies down, because you cannot lie. You cannot say, "I'm going to harm you," and then harm them.
Right.
And so I think that's really cool. And then like the culture that's built around that, like what we were talking about, is that the elves, their native tongue that they like to speak in is the ancient language. But they are very tricky with how they say. They speak in a lot of non-absolutes, where, you know, they say, I don't have an example, but they'll say something and mean something else. So they'll speak in like in ways that it can be interpreted differently, so that they can quote unquote lie. I guess that way. So that's a whole culture that's kind of evolved around speaking a language where you're not allowed to lie.
Yeah.
And how do they interact? And when they're interacting with other races in Allegasia, like other races kind of hate interacting with them, because they are never like, you know, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's just a culture of how they've been brought up, because when they're speaking their native language, they can't.
Yeah.
they can't say that. And so they're like, oh, you know, maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do that. And it's just super frustrating to anyone interacting with them.
Yeah. The other like kind of flip side of this, like we've been talking about how does like language influence the world. The flip side of that is how does the world affect the language? And that's something that like specifically Sanderson is like really good at. Which is like this episode's turning into another like advertisement for Sanderson.
And I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it. Like he's really good at it. But he'll add little like basically like curse words or like swear words.
Crim.
Right, exactly. That are like specific to the like world, and it makes like so much sense. It's like, why would like somebody say like damn it, you know, like that's not like there's no reason for that. And so like Mistborn, they'll say like rust, right? They'll say like like this rusting like piece of whatever, you know, and like that's how they curse, like that's how they show like,
which is
emotion.
An awesome way to curse, because everything's built around metal.
Exactly. Yeah. So like it's like, oh, that totally makes sense. Like that's why they say that. Stormlight, they'll use like storms, right? Or they'll say like
Stormfather.
Yeah, by the Stormfather or whatever, and they'll like invoke the names of like the different like heralds or whatever, and it's like, okay, like you're able to just like by this simple, like your character needs to show emotion anyway. You may as well let the world affect the language that they speak, and that just kind of helps draw the reader into it. I think it's just like like when I started noticing that he was doing that, I was like, why aren't more people doing this? Like this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like part of it is he's just good at it. Like it just like when you hear the character like, and after you read like your third like series in like a Sanderson novel, it's like, oh, what's like the curse word in this world,
Yeah.
You like say it and you're like, oh, okay, like it's merciful Domai or whatever in this book.
My one of my coworkers pointed me to a subreddit. There's a subreddit, I think it's shit posting. Like that's a common term. Yeah. But it's called crim posting.
Nice.
And it's just all like shit posting Sanderson memes. It's like, oh, this is awesome.
I love that.
So it's fantastic. I've definitely subscribed and love that.
Nice.
I have to not click on spoilers now because I haven't read
to be
everything now.
Yeah, that's tricky. So those are some elements of like really good world building. I think if you like start to break into some of those things individually, you start to realize where world building falls apart for some authors,
Yep.
And where it can start to get bad. I think my best example of really bad world building is The Phantom Menace. I think that is like an example of just god awful world building. And part of it is like it's almost amazing that it is so bad because like it has pod racing. And so like it should be good, right? That should be enough to like make it good, but it's not. Like it over explains so much that just like is not needed, right? Like you start out and like contrasted to like the first like Star Wars: A New Hope, where you're dropped into the middle of something and you like instantly understand like, okay, there's like a civil war going on. Like that's really all I need to know. And there's like a Senate that's like getting dissolved because of this like massive weapon that's being created. Like that's really all I need to know. And it like just gives you like just enough for you to like feel like, and then it just shows you the world, right? It shows you Luke having to like work on the like whatever they're called, the water collection things that are you know, like and he's having to like work on these droids, and you get this feeling of like, oh, this is like a society where like they're a space society, but they have to reuse things, you know, and they're like almost kind of poverty driven, and there's this huge underground, and like you're just like shown all of that, as opposed to, you know, the classic complaints about Phantom Menace, that there's trade agreements that you just
too
don't care.
good. It's
that there's midichlorians that you're like, I just didn't need an explanation.
I didn't need
for
this.
You know, that there's like this like Senate thing going on, and you get these scenes about like emotional speeches that you're like, I'm just not connecting with like what's going on in the Senate right now. It's not integral.
There was an episode where we kind of talked about this, where, you know, episode 4 jumps into galactic war, whereas like episode 1 jumps into trade disputes, and it's just like, okay, that's too much. Like I don't care. I want to see lightsaber fights. I want to see that kind of stuff in a movie, but like you're showing me politician negotiations, and I hate sand. Well, that's actually an Attack of the Clones, I think.
Yeah, but like, but like one of the main plots is that there's a character that's a slave, but like there are ready access to droids to do like menial tasks. So it's like, why are you paying money to like own a slave and then like feed them and like house them? Like that's a lot of stuff that you just don't have to pay for with a droid. And there's like droids everywhere. So like just the whole thing falls apart, right? And it's like it doesn't pass a red face logic test. And then again, like we get back to like, okay, if there are like basic changes in that you've made from like a normal human world, like how are they affecting like the way that the story is playing out in the world? And those things just like aren't matching up, you know, where again, like trade agreements, it's like this isn't a part that like affects, I guess, the characters in the story,
the overall thing.
Yeah, you know, and the ability to use the Force and like have space travel and stuff like that, like that's not playing out in Anakin's life, you know, until like later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is actually a really good point into where bad world building can really negatively affect a great story.
Yeah, for sure.
And I will stand by it. I think that the prequel story is a better story than the OG, the original trilogy, where I love the prequel trilogy. I hate the okay, no, I don't necessarily hate the prequel movies. They're just worse.
Yeah.
They're just worse. They're just way worse than the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And that being said, I think that there is a little bit of nuance there where like you get 3 movies, right? What are you going to convey in 3 movies? Whereas if you had a series, I think that you could work in that politics. You could work in the trade negotiations.
Yeah, for sure.
But like with a movie centered around it, why? Like,
especially when the point of the movie is to introduce Anakin.
Yeah, which comes in an hour late.
Yeah, for sure. I think we need to have an episode where we just like tear into even more. Like it'll just be a podcast episode that says, here's why the Phantom Menace is bad. And we'll just have a whole podcast episode about it. Another one, just a bad example, we talk about Expeditionary Force a lot. I think it has some good but mostly bad world building going on.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I think the biggest trope that like the thing that I wanted to highlight, the biggest thing that it falls into is that it has this habit of creating a species and making them extremely just monotone. Like where it's like, this is the bad species, and then this species is like the gambling species or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like,
no, I would agree.
That's all that they do. And what it ends up happening is just like, okay, like humans are so complex, you know, and we're so varied, and there's so much nuance to an individual person and personality, religion, culture, all the things that we talked about in the elements that are like so important. And it's like, how can an entire race, like galaxy spanning race, have just this monotone feeling to it?
Yeah,
you know, you totally fail.
One thing, right?
One thing that defines them. We expect more nuance than that, and it doesn't mean that you have to like tell these really intricate stories from every single character. It just means that like if there are scenes where a human character is interacting with an alien of some kind, it needs to not feel like they're always talking to the same alien.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to be able to predict what that conversation is going to look like.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think that's a good point. I read Expeditionary Force for the comedy.
Yeah.
Not the world building.
Not for the world building, yeah.
But yeah, totally.
So do you have any like bad examples of world building?
I really don't. I think we read too many good books.
We read too many good books. That's good, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. So I kind of what I've boiled down to, and the thing that like the core idea that I've really thought about with world building is kind of like how an author can introduce minuscule details and how those affect life, right? So it's not the overarching story, right? Like you can tell a story and it can be very bland. You don't ever have to understand necessarily about the politics or about the weather, about the landscaping, about that. But it's like the details, and if they add those in, but not overwhelmingly, they just kind of like get you to immerse into the field. And George R. R. Martin has a really good quote about this.
Okay.
I'm gonna read that now. So George R. R. Martin is the writer of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we hope.
Yeah, Song of Ice and Fire. So his quote is, "We read fantasy to find the colors again, to taste strong spices and to hear the songs the sirens sang. There's something about old and true in fantasy that speaks to something deep within us, to the child who dreamt that one day he would hunt the forest of the night and feast beneath the hollow hills and find a love to last forever somewhere south of Oz and north of Shiring La. They can keep their heaven. When I die, I want to go to Middle Earth," which I thought was just like a really cool, like we read, or like a lot of these fantasies provide an escape, right? It immerses you into the world, and I've used that word a lot. Like it gets you into the world, and it allows you to kind of like understand and like live into something, and like the minuscule details. So like Sanderson does a really good job of this in a lot of his books, but like he describes the taste of the jam that they're eating on the bread, or like the music in Lord of the Rings, right? Like it's things that could be taken out, but the story wouldn't feel as immersive or as great without them.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, where it's just like it's not integral to the story, but it helps you get into the story.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that must be so hard as an author, because I think they know like all of those details, but again, they can't write an encyclopedia. They can't just like give us all of the details. But like again, if you're comparing to our world, like if you take just even Europe, like think of all the tastes and smells, and colors and sights and like all these like details. That is like, how would you even explain the difference in like Middle Eastern countries to like somebody who has never been there before? And like walking them through that is like you have to do that. You have to be able to write it in such a way that they can see themselves walking down the street. That's just as important as being able to see themselves in like a fight scene.
Absolutely.
I also had a quote written down. This one's from Tad Williams, who's not someone I've read, but both George R. R. Martin and Christopher Paolini reference his Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series, which awesome name, by the way. That's a super dope name.
Okay.
And like the book isn't that. The book is titled, I forget, something else, but Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn was the the title of the series. And he wrote, "Very seldom do people say it's down in the Battery District," which is where they used to keep the cannons hundreds of years ago. They just say it's down in the Battery. And I thought that was a really good way to like frame up like, oh, okay, that's why an author can't just tell you everything. But if you get that little like window, you get that little teaser into like, why is it called Battery? If you can get your reader to like ask that question, that's really cool. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, there's depth there. And that can be explained later, because you already kind of like set it up. And once it's like I need to have answers to a question like when I ask them, not before I ask them.
Yeah, no, I was actually about to say almost exactly that.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's how you get like nerds like us to write a podcast about a book.
Yeah, exactly.
It's because we start questioning, and then we look up the wiki, and then we get way too far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the Valar?
Yeah. There are more rings? What?
Right. Flame of Uno. Oh no. I gotta go figure that out now.
Good. But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed this discussion. I really like I said before, like this is something that I really enjoy talking about and like reading and like having those unanswered questions that the author can explain to me later, or I can figure out, right? Rather than just telling me.
Yeah. So, this was a fun one because like with the other writing topics, like we don't do it, but world building is something we do, right?
Yeah.
Through like RPG game and stuff like that, like there are. This is one that like we actually interact with. It's like, oh, I've done that before. I've like tried to work on like world building before, so it was a really fun topic to kind of like research. Now we're not writing books, so like those things of like working details, and that's maybe not quite as important. But how does language affect things? How does religion affect things? How does weather affect things? Yeah, those are really fun things to think through.
And I really think that the more you read, the better GM you're gonna be. Right?
Oh, for sure.
Like, because you can pull, and it's like a lot of the obscure things you can straight up steal. Like don't tell him that I did. Don't tell him that. But like you can understand and see multiple different viewpoints of how people introduce religion, how people introduce magic, how people introduce landscaping, and like pull from the things that you love and put them into your world.
Yeah.
Which I think would be it's really cool. I have just a OneNote of things that I just want to include or modify into a world that I build someday for when I actually have time to run another campaign.
Right. But you have to, or else like you start to run out of ideas, right?
Exactly.
Or you start to remember, like, I remember there was things that I wanted to implement, but I forgot.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, from all these great books that I've read and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've really enjoyed the whiskey.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, we'll keep that up.
I poured myself another one. So
I'm glad.
So it's definitely good. I'm feeling it. So
good. I will have another good one for you next time.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So if you are just super curious about where to find more of us or more of our content, we have a lot of spaces that you can do that. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter. Mm-hmm. We have a Discord, which if I was to recommend two of those, I'd say Instagram and Discord. We're doing a lot of fun conversations in Discord, and we're posting a lot of board game pictures on Instagram.
Yep.
So you can find us there. Fantasy and Some Flights, you'll be able to find us. Also, our show notes are going to be on the website.
Yep.
So the website will kind of reference a bunch of these stuffs and give you links and everything to, did you hear a book that you wanted to listen to that we had talked about today?
Yeah, we covered a lot of books today.
Yeah, we covered a
lot
of books. So
we'll also have some links to like additional reading if you're like looking to get more into world building. We have some references for you to look at.
Awesome. Yeah.
Good articles.
Yeah, no, this has been a really fun episode, and I'm looking forward to our next one.
Yep, looking forward to it.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.